Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a smug HOA queen tries to seize a private pool in the name of community equity, one homeowner fights back with cameras, lawyers, and a whole lot of sarcasm. What starts as a letter turns into sabotage, arrest, and the ultimate neighborhood showdown. The day that letter showed up in my mailbox, I genuinely thought it was a prank. I mean, who the hell sends a certified notice demanding that I either give up my private pool to a bunch of random neighbors or pay to build a second one for the woman making the demand? It sounded like something straight out of a bad satire. But the Birch Pines Hills HOA, and more specifically its newly crowned queen, Karen Lee Sanders, apparently didn't see the absurdity. To them, it was community policy. I stood at my kitchen island, coffee going cold in my hand, rereading the damn thing for the third time just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. It was printed on official HOA letterhead, complete with a self-important emblem that looked like someone slapped a pine tree onto a judge's gavel. The wording was so smug it practically dripped condescension. Something about restoring architectural harmony and social equity by either granting access to my infinity pool or funding the construction of a duplicate on Ms. Sanders's lot. The final line said, in bold, "Failure to comply may result in collective HOA review and action." I laughed out loud. Not a chuckle, a full-on "what the hell is this" kind of laugh. Because here's the thing, my property doesn't fall under their HOA. Never has, never will. I own 12 acres of sloped land just west of the Birch Pines development, and when I bought it 5 years ago, one of the key selling points was the absolute independence from any HOA nonsense. The parcel was grandfathered out during the subdivision planning stages. It's documented, certified, recorded at the county clerk's office in triplicate with a damn red ribbon on it. Still, I figured someone was having a little too much Chardonnay at a community mixer and decided to get creative. I threw the letter on the counter and went back to work on estimates for a kitchen remodel in town. By the next morning, I'd already forgotten about it until a knock on the gate panel flashed across my security feed. It was a guy in a tucked-in polo, clipboard in hand, standing at my entry gate like he was about to read me my rights. I buzzed him in just far enough to speak through the intercom. "This is Jensen," I said. "Can I help you?" "Good morning, sir," he said way too cheerfully. "I'm here on behalf of the Birch Pines Hills HOA to deliver an official action summary approved by the board. You should have received preliminary notice yesterday." I blinked. "You mean that letter demanding I build a pool for your president?" He paused, clearly not expecting me to call it what it was. I believe the phrasing was a community adjustment request." "Number?" "The phrasing was extortion." "Sir, I'm just the messenger. I have a hard copy for your records." I didn't let him through, told him to leave the paperwork at the gatepost, and wished him luck. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the gate clicked closed. I waited until he was gone before retrieving the folder, printed on heavy bond paper like that made it more legitimate. It was the same threat as before, only now with a smug little resolution passed by a group of retirees playing government. By noon, I was already on the phone with my attorney, Kelly Drew, sharp as a scalpel and twice as fast. She laughed, too. Not because it wasn't serious, but because these kinds of HOA stunts are more common than people think. "You're outside their jurisdiction," she confirmed. "They have zero legal authority over you, but document everything. This has Karen written all over it." "Figuratively and literally," I muttered, flipping to the back page where she'd signed her name in big looping cursive. "I guess she's moved on from mailbox inspections and lawn color complaints." "I'd put up new signage," Kelly said. "Private property, not under HOA jurisdiction. Just to be clear. Also, add exterior cameras, especially around the pool." I already had 2 cameras facing the gate and a wide angle covering the front half of the house. I didn't think I needed one aimed directly at the pool. That changed quickly. Later that afternoon, I noticed movement behind my house, out past the lower terrace where the sloped lawn meets the tree line. I checked the feed and caught a glimpse of someone in a wide-brimmed sun hat standing behind the fence line, looking down toward the pool with binoculars. I zoomed in, enhanced the image, and nearly spit out my beer. Karen. Not even pretending to be discreet, just standing there like some HOA pervert bird-watching my spa jets. I stepped outside, waved, and yelled, "You want me to send you the chlorine schedule too?" She didn't answer, just disappeared back into the trees. That night, I replaced the signs with metal-backed plates. No trespassing. Private pool. Not affiliated with any HOA, I ordered 2 more high-res cameras with infrared and solar backup. If they were going to start something, I wasn't going to be caught with my pants down, or worse, my pool cover open. By the end of the week, I had a thick file started, copies of both letters, screenshots of Karen's peeping act, the delivery guy's face, and a full layout of my property boundaries with county certification. I sent it all to Kelly with the subject line, "Let the HOA games begin." I wasn't worried. Not yet. But something told me this wasn't the last stunt Karen would pull. I had just gotten back from a supply run into town, some pool tile samples and a replacement sensor for the east-facing gate, when I noticed something strange on my front porch. There was a trail of wet footprints leading away from the side path toward the gate. Not just one set either, multiple bare feet, the kind you'd see at a hotel pool, wet soles, and the occasional dragging flip-flop. For a second, I thought maybe one of the delivery guys had wandered a little too far in the rain, but then I glanced at the camera feed, and my jaw locked. There they were, on the playback from just 2 hours earlier, Karen in a wide-brimmed straw hat, oversized sunglasses, and a neon one-piece. Behind her, like some deranged parade, trailed 3 women, a few teenagers, and 2 loud, yappy little dogs. They had hopped the back fence, used one of my plastic chairs to climb over, and were now lounging around my private infinity pool like it was a resort. Pool toys, towels, snacks, even a goddamn portable speaker. The worst part? They looked so casual about it. Like this wasn't even the first time. I stood there in silence watching the video as Karen spread a towel across one of my custom wood loungers and settled in like Queen HOA on her throne. One of the teenagers jumped into the water with a cannonball splash, nearly soaking the robotic skimmer. Karen didn't flinch, just sipped from a hydro flask and gestured lazily toward the view like she was showing it off to potential buyers. That was it. I grabbed my truck keys and turned back around. I'd been on the fence about replacing the gate lock with a reinforced latch. Guess what just moved to the top of the list? 15 minutes later, I was pulling back into the driveway. I didn't announce myself. I didn't yell. I simply walked over to the side gate, slid the new latch into place, and locked it from the outside. No drama, no shouting, just a clean click of metal, followed by the sweet silence of inevitability. Then I walked up to the house, stepped onto the porch, and leaned back in my chair with a beer in hand. I waited. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, the music stopped. Someone must have realized something was off. A woman in a sun hat walked over to the gate, tried it, then pulled harder, nothing. Another woman came over, then Karen. From where I was sitting, I could see her mouthing something. Probably a mixture of "what the hell" and "open this gate." I raised my beer in a mock toast. She started gesturing wildly. I picked up my phone and dialed. Yes, I'd like to report an active trespassing situation on my property. Multiple unauthorized individuals, access gained by climbing a fence. Yes, I have security footage. No, they're not guests. Yes, I'll wait here. 10 minutes later, the first patrol car pulled up. Then another. Karen must have realized what was happening because she practically sprinted to the corner of the yard to meet them. I could hear her from across the property, voice pitched to a perfect shriek. "This is a mistake. I thought this was part of the HOA. We have an agreement. Verbal, of course." The officer was having none of it. He calmly walked up to my porch while Karen trailed behind, panting and red-faced. "Mr. Jensen," he asked, "you called about trespassers?" "Yes, sir," I said. "Got video, got property lines, and I've got about 10 wet footprints that say I'm not hallucinating." He took a look at my ID, asked me to pull up the footage. I showed him the whole circus act, Karen boosting herself over the fence, teenagers with chips and soda, dogs running around like they owned the place. That was enough. The officer turned back to the group by the pool and asked Karen to come with him. She protested loudly, said she was confused, that she assumed it was HOA land, that there had never been a fence before, lie, and that she was only trying to bring the neighborhood together. "Ma'am, that doesn't give you the right to enter someone else's property." Without permission, the officer said. They gave citations to the adults in the group and a warning to the teens. Karen, however, was cuffed and placed into the back of the patrol car, still ranting about community standards and disproportionate enforcement. I signed a statement, turned over the footage, and watched as they finally drove away. But of course, it wasn't over. 2 days later, I got a notice from the county court. Karen was pleading not guilty, claiming a misunderstanding based on shared jurisdiction. Her attorney, A local blowhard who probably gets paid in HOA gift cards filed a motion saying the fence had only recently been built, that community access had long existed, and that the pool's visibility from HOA properties made it a shared amenity by de facto usage. I nearly spit out my coffee. Shared amenity? What next? My bathroom. My lawyer, Kelly, was amused. "Let them try it," she said. "We'll demolish them in court, but keep documenting everything. She's going to escalate." And deep down, I knew Kelly was right. Karen wasn't embarrassed. She was furious. It started with an envelope shoved under my gate. No postage, no return address, just a heavy manila folder marked Urgent Property Compliance Review. I knew the smell of HOA theatrics the moment I picked it up. Still, I brought it inside, half expecting a badly written cease and desist about my lawn edging or the color tone of my gravel. But no, this was new. Inside was a stack of papers, maps, highlighted plats, and a printed letter from the Birch Pines Hills HOA board, signed again by Karen Sanders. This one was a level above her usual insanity. According to the revised neighborhood planning records, my 12-acre property was originally designated as a community green zone with recreational facilities and had been erroneously excluded from HOA integration during final zoning. It went on to say that the HOA had unanimously voted to file a jurisdictional restoration petition requesting that my land be reincorporated into the HOA community. And in bold, right at the bottom, pending formal approval, your property shall be considered part of Birch Pines Hills for enforcement purposes. I stared at the page in silence, then read it again. Enforcement purposes, meaning they thought they could start bossing me around right now. I called Kelly and read it to her. She went quiet, then cursed. "They're trying to retroactively annex your land," she said flatly. "Illegally. You'll need to get ahead of this." I spent the next 4 hours digging through every file I had: survey plats, original purchase contracts, zoning maps, satellite overlays, the whole damn history of the parcel from the day it was subdivided in the early 90s. I even called the county land office and requested digital backups of anything tied to my lot number. As expected, there wasn't a single document that listed my property as being within HOA boundaries. Not one. In fact, the original subdivision map had a clear demarcation, a dotted line showing my land as adjacent but independent. Kelly and I met the next morning and compiled a formal cease and desist, accompanied by an affidavit, certified surveys, and a notice of pending litigation in case they escalated. I mailed copies to the HOA's office, sent one to Karen's address via certified mail, and forwarded everything to the county. Then I sat back and waited. Did Karen stop? Of course not. A week later, I received an email from the Planning and Zoning Department of the county, alerting me that a citizen's petition had been filed requesting a jurisdictional correction and restoration of community recreational space. The document was signed by Karen Sanders and 3 members of the HOA board, and it was paired with a supplemental site plan that showed my land and my pool, labeled as HOA Common Space Parcel C. I damn near put my fist through the wall. The site plan was a cheap forgery. They'd taken an old zoning map, photoshopped my boundary lines, and inserted a fake HOA label in red ink. But to someone unfamiliar with the area, it looked almost legitimate. Almost. I drove straight to the planning office with my original maps, property tax history, and the full document chain dating back 20 years. The moment I laid it all out on the planning commissioner's desk, he shook his head and sighed. "This is bold," he said, "but fake. You've got nothing to worry about. We'll kill this before it reaches committee." "They forged a government document," I said. "That's not just bold. That's criminal." He nodded. "We'll investigate." Meanwhile, I returned home to find a new HOA notice tacked to my gate, again unsigned, but clearly from Karen. It read, "As a courtesy to our HOA members and in anticipation of your reintegration, please refrain from denying access to shared amenities. Resistance will be noted in future enforcement action." I took it down, scanned it, and added it to the ever-growing evidence folder. The next morning, I filed a formal police report on attempted fraud, attempted misappropriation of land, and forgery. Then I called the local news outlet and leaked everything: documents, maps, emails, footage. If Karen wanted a war, she was about to learn just how deep I could dig. That night, around 11 p.m., I was reviewing footage from my property cameras when I noticed something strange. A flicker, then static. One of the feeds, my pool-facing camera, cut out. Not like a software glitch, like someone had physically severed the feed. I threw on boots and headed outside, flashlight in hand. The night was cold and still. Too still. I moved along the tree line until I saw it. The camera had been snapped off the mount, the wire dangling loose like a severed nerve. That's when I noticed the smell. Acidic, metallic. I turned toward the pool and my stomach dropped. The water was cloudy, white, and milky under the porch lights. The chrome fixtures were already starting to discolor. My gut told me what it was before the lab confirmed it later. Someone had poured industrial-strength acid cleaner into the water, the kind used to strip concrete. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I ordered hidden solar-powered cameras, ones they couldn't see or cut. Karen had crossed into full-blown sabotage, and I knew damn well this wasn't random. It was personal now. I didn't tell anyone about the new cameras, not even Kelly. These weren't your off-the-shelf smart cams from the hardware store. These were military-grade, motion-activated, infrared, solar-powered little monsters with encrypted cloud backups and time-stamped metadata. I'd installed 4 of them across the tree line and near the lower slope where someone had slipped in the night the pool was sabotaged. They blended perfectly into the landscape. No blinking lights, no visible wiring, just silent little eyes, waiting. 3 days went by. Quiet. Then on the 4th night, just past 2 a.m., I got the ping. Motion detected. South perimeter. I opened the feed on my tablet, expecting maybe a coyote or a deer, but there he was. Human. Male. Hoodie, gloves, moving slow, almost casually, like he knew the path by heart. He was carrying a red plastic gas can. My heart kicked once, then dropped into my boots. The guy approached the fence near the southeast corner, same place where the camera had been cut last time, but this time he didn't even look up. He ducked, stepped onto a crate hidden in the underbrush, and tossed the can over. Then he climbed after it. I watched him as he crouched behind one of my ornamental pines and poured the contents, thick, viscous liquid, into a drain line that fed the backflow of the filtration system. Son of a bitch was trying to destroy it from inside. I didn't call the police. I called my neighbor Mason, retired Army, lives a quarter-mile down the road, and happens to be the owner of a working thermal drone and a ranch rifle. He was airborne in 15 minutes. I stayed inside, watching the live drone feed hover over my backyard as Mason narrated from his end. Target's still on property. Looks like he's finishing up. Wait, hold on. He's heading toward the east slope. That's when I called the cops. Active property trespass. Suspect is still on site. I have real-time drone surveillance and ground-level footage. Possibly carrying flammable liquid. The operator didn't even hesitate. Stay inside. Officers are en route. By the time the patrol cars pulled up, the guy had reached the eastern slope again, trying to climb out with the can now empty. Officers caught him halfway over. Weapon drawn. Commands shouted. He froze. Hands up, dropped the can. I watched through the binoculars from the porch. One of the officers cuffed him, patted him down, and pulled out his wallet. Then they called over the radio. Suspect identified as Austin Carter, works for Birch Pines Hills HOA, listed as Assistant Property Liaison. Of course he did. They put him in the back of the car while the other officer came to speak with me. I handed over the drone feed, the cam footage, and the screenshots of him tossing the can. The officer nodded grimly. We're bringing him in for questioning. Do you want to press charges? Absolutely. Austin cracked after 3 hours in custody. I didn't hear it directly, but Kelly forwarded the report the next morning. He confessed that Karen had sent him, promised him legal protection, and told him she was reclaiming the pool for the community. She even told him that the land was in legal limbo and that soon it'll be part of the HOA anyway. His exact words. She said it's our duty to bring balance back to the neighborhood. Balance. Like this was some twisted biblical crusade, and I was the evil water baron polluting the moral fabric of their manicured utopia. Kelly's voice was razor sharp when she called me. We're going after them, not just Karen, the entire HOA. This is conspiracy, Clayton. We've got trespass, sabotage, destruction of property, attempted fraud, and now criminal solicitation. I could hear her pulling up documents as we spoke. I'll file by end of day, civil and criminal. We're naming Karen the HOA board and the HOA as an entity. I want depositions, internal emails, financial records, meeting logs, everything. If they so much as sneezed near your fence, I'll make them answer for it. I didn't argue. The next morning, I received an anonymous envelope in my mailbox. Inside, a printed email thread between Karen and the board members, one of whom apparently wasn't thrilled with how far things had gone. "Karen, this isn't a strategic dispute anymore. You're directing staff to enter private property. We should stop before this becomes criminal." Karen's reply: "If we don't act now, that pool will remain a monument to inequality and arrogance. We've been quiet long enough." I brought the letter straight to Kelly. It was enough to request a subpoena for the HOA's internal communications. The judge approved it that week. Things were unraveling for Karen, and fast. But I knew people like her don't go down quietly. The subpoena landed like a bomb. Within 48 hours, Kelly had access to the HOA's internal email system. What started as a trickle of awkward messages soon turned into a flood of damning correspondence. Karen hadn't just acted alone. She'd been orchestrating everything with chilling precision. There were emails dating back 3 months, long before I received the first letter, discussing how Clayton's extravagant installation casts a shadow, both literal and social, on the spirit of the community. One board member had suggested inviting me to a casual dialogue, but Karen had responded curtly, "This isn't a negotiation. It's a correction." Even worse, we uncovered a PDF draft of a special HOA amendment proposal that would retroactively reclassify adjacent properties as adjunct recreational zones, a fancy way of pretending my land belonged to them. I was stunned. These weren't HOA housewives gossiping over hedges. This was coordinated legal warfare. They had spent actual HOA funds on research, legal advice, and even private consulting to figure out how to pressure the county clerk into re-reviewing boundary decisions. One thread read, "County records show parcel 27A as independent. But if we challenge the 2006 line drawing and cite outdated zoning overlays, we may gain enough ground for reconsideration. Worth pursuing." They were trying to move the lines of reality. Kelly compiled it all into a blistering motion for injunction. We filed simultaneously for a civil suit against Karen and the HOA, and a criminal complaint against Karen for conspiracy, fraud, and property damage. But then came the most surreal escalation yet. 1 week later, I got a knock at the door. 2 men in khakis and HOA-branded polos stood stiffly on my porch, holding a clipboard and a roll of bright orange caution tape. "We're here to cordon off the recreational hazard pending administrative review," one said, barely meeting my eyes. I blinked. "You mean my pool?" They nodded. "We have provisional documentation allowing temporary restriction of potentially unsafe community features until reviewed by HOA Safety and Wellness." I laughed, loud and sharp. "This isn't a community feature. This is my private backyard." He flipped the clipboard and showed me a piece of paper with HOA letterhead and a forged-looking provisional notice signed, again, by Karen L. Sanders. I didn't say another word. I turned around, walked back inside, and dialed the sheriff's department. Deputies arrived 20 minutes later and escorted the HOA men off my property. One of them tried to argue that the pool was visible from 3 separate HOA plots and thus created a visual liability. The deputy just looked at him like he'd swallowed a cactus. The best part? One of my cameras recorded everything, including the moment one of the men attempted to unroll the caution tape around my lounge chairs. That, combined with their forged paperwork, gave us grounds for additional criminal charges: attempted trespass under color of authority and impersonation of a code enforcement official. Karen, of course, denied authorizing anything. But more emails came to light. In one, she had written, "We must remain firm. The optics of backing down will destabilize our board's perceived authority, push through the barrier claims, and force a safety reassessment. Use visual impairment from elevated slope language. It's vague enough." That was it. That was the straw. Kelly called me the next day. "I just spoke to the DA. They're moving forward with formal charges. Multiple counts: fraud, falsification of public documents, malicious property damage, and now unlawful coordination to commit trespass." I walked outside, looked at the pool, now sparkling again after weeks of repairs, and sat on the edge. "You think she knows what's coming?" I asked. "Oh," Kelly said, her voice like steel. "She'll find out soon enough." Karen didn't just double down. She detonated. The morning after the sheriff escorted her men off my property, my power went out. Not just a flicker, not a storm-related surge, a deliberate kill switch. I checked the breakers, called the utility company, and after an hour on hold, got a polite representative who told me something disturbing. There was a temporary suspension order filed on your service, sir. It was faxed in yesterday morning by someone identifying themselves as acting on behalf of the HOA's facilities board. I don't even have a facilities board. I called Kelly immediately, and she was already ahead of me. She had just received notice that my property was flagged in a neighborhood incident report as under review for zoning violations. Filed anonymously. 3 guesses who. That night, I went out to double-check the perimeter after hearing my dog barking. I had cameras, but I wanted to see with my own eyes. And that's when I noticed something. The water in the pool was cloudy again, and the tiles had strange reddish streaks. I grabbed a flashlight and scanned the decking. There, boot prints in the dust, leading around the pool toward the far slope near the tree line. And just beyond the fence, a shallow trench. Someone had tried to dig under the fence and jammed in a hose that led nowhere. Sabotage again. I pulled the camera footage. This time, they were smart. Whoever came wore a hood and avoided every visible lens, but they missed one. My solar backup cam, tucked inside a floodlight casing, caught just a few frames, but enough. It was Karen's assistant, a lanky man named Joel, who once introduced himself at a HOA barbecue as Community Operations Manager. Apparently, that meant breaking and entering with industrial chemicals. The damage was worse than it looked. The pool's filtration system was clogged with sludge. Someone had poured a compound that reacted with chlorine and formed a mild acid, staining the tile and corroding metal parts. My contractor called it deliberate tampering. That was it. No more patience. No more waiting for the court calendar to catch up. Kelly filed for an emergency protection order against the HOA and Karen personally, citing ongoing criminal harassment, sabotage, and health code violations. At the same time, the sheriff's department pulled Joel in for questioning, and Joel cracked. Under pressure, he admitted everything. Karen had convinced him the HOA had legal claim to the property, and that Clayton's arrogance was harming the neighborhood's unity. She called the pool a luxury installation that inspires envy and division, and told Joel it needed to be neutralized. Worse, Joel confessed that Karen had authorized payments to him directly from the HOA discretionary fund, labeled as beautification services, over $12,000. Kelly got the check images. It was irrefutable. Fraud, bribery, and now felony conspiracy. The district attorney's office scheduled an indictment hearing within the week. Karen was served the notice at her home by a deputy on her own front lawn in full view of her neighbors. That same evening, HOA members began posting angry messages in their neighborhood forum. Screenshots of those messages found their way to us. Some supported Karen, but most were livid. One read, "If it's true she used our funds for her personal vendetta, she should be removed immediately. This isn't North Korea." Another simply said, "I liked the guy's pool." The tide had finally turned. By the time the indictment hearing was scheduled, Karen had gone from smug and confident to visibly unraveling. Her attempts to rally the HOA board around her had failed. 3 members resigned, and 1 openly accused her of lying about where their dues were being spent. I wasn't surprised. I'd already handed the sheriff's office a thick folder of documents, payment records, photos, emails, video captures, and they had confirmed that the HOA's discretionary fund had been misused for months under her sole authorization. But Karen wasn't done playing games. The day before the hearing, I received a cease and desist letter from a new law firm, this time representing the Birch Pines Beautification Trust. It claimed that my pool was an ongoing environmental hazard and that the HOA intended to seek emergency administrative enforcement to have it drained and permanently decommissioned. They even attached a laughably fake soil report suggesting runoff from my pool was degrading the shared hillside aesthetic. It was almost poetic in its insanity, but I didn't even bother responding. I just forwarded it to Kelly. Her reply, "They're circling the drain." And then came the hearing. I sat in the back row of the courtroom, flanked by Kelly and 2 deputies. Karen entered with her lawyer and tried to act unbothered, but her pale face and darting eyes betrayed her. The DA walked through the charges one by one: criminal trespassing, property damage, conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of public records, and misuse of community funds. When Joel was called to testify, he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, but his words sealed Karen's fate. He detailed every conversation, every instruction, every shady errand. He even brought receipts, literal ones. gas station logs, Venmo screenshots, and handwritten notes from Karen, including one that read, "Use gloves. If anyone asks, you're spraying for bugs." The courtroom was silent as the DA laid out the timeline of events. The letter demanding I share or replicate my pool, the unauthorized party and illegal entry, the sabotage, the forged zoning complaint, the bribery, the assault on the integrity of the HOA itself. When it was our turn, Kelly presented the full chain of evidence, including an official letter from the county zoning office, verifying that my property had never been, and could never be, part of the HOA. The judge didn't need long. He granted the restraining order, approved criminal prosecution, and ordered Karen immediately removed from her position as HOA president. But the hammer hadn't fallen yet. The judge set bail at $50,000. Karen didn't have it. She was taken into custody right there in the courtroom, cuffed in front of the same neighbors she once barked orders at. I could see one woman in the gallery actually smile. The news broke that evening. Local outlets ran the headline, "HOA President Arrested in Pool Sabotage Scheme." My inbox exploded. Neighbors emailed apologies. Strangers from down the road offered support. Someone even offered to repaint my pool deck for free as a thank you for standing up to HOA tyranny. The next morning, I walked out to the edge of my property with a mug of coffee. The air felt cleaner, quieter. I looked at the pool. Still cloudy from the damage, but shimmering under the morning sun. It was finally mine again. The official sentencing came 6 weeks later. By then, Karen had cycled through 2 more attorneys, tried to declare a medical hardship, and even filed a motion to suppress Joel's testimony, claiming it was emotionally coercive. None of it worked. The court had more than enough documents, financial records, videos, eyewitness accounts, expert statements to bury her case in concrete. I attended the sentencing out of principle. The courtroom was half full, mostly HOA members, some former board members, and a couple of local reporters. Karen shuffled in wearing a beige prison jumpsuit and handcuffs. Her eyes darted once toward me, then quickly away. The judge didn't hold back. He called her actions a grotesque abuse of power and trust, and noted how her vendetta against me escalated into criminal conspiracy and environmental vandalism. He listed every charge again: criminal trespassing, malicious mischief, filing false documents, attempted land fraud, misuse of community funds, and solicitation of sabotage. She was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. No parole eligibility for the first 3. That moment wasn't triumphant. It was clean. Like pressure being released from a system that had been grinding for too long. I left the courthouse without speaking to anyone. The media tried to catch me for a quote, but I just said, "Justice was done," and drove off. In the months that followed, the fallout spread. The HOA board was formally disbanded. A court-appointed receiver was brought in to audit all their financials. Several residents filed class action lawsuits against the association itself. At least one former treasurer admitted he signed checks under pressure. The community, once pristine and perfectly trimmed, started looking more real. Families put up bird feeders, dogs barked freely, and some folks even smiled when passing by. As for me, I rebuilt. The pool needed extensive repairs, and I took the opportunity to upgrade. New tile, solar heating, a reinforced security system with motion lights and cameras. The new gate had biometric access, and the private property sign was now laser-etched in stainless steel. But I wasn't done having fun with it. Right next to the gate, I had a stone marker installed, smooth Colorado granite. On it, in elegant serif font, was carved, "Private pool, not for presidents, not for Karens." It became something of a neighborhood legend. People came by to take photos. One guy even asked if I'd sell t-shirts with the phrase. I said maybe. Then, about 8 months after the sentencing, I got a letter. Not from Karen, her mail privileges were likely limited, but from the new owners of her old house, a young couple with a toddler and a golden retriever. They introduced themselves, explained they weren't affiliated with the old HOA, and asked if they could invite me over for a barbecue as thanks for fighting the good fight. I brought a bottle of bourbon and a tub of ribs. We talked, laughed, and watched the kid run around their freshly sodded backyard. They had set up a little inflatable pool near the patio. It was blue, round, and about 2 feet deep. Fitting, I thought. Real pools are earned, not demanded.